a clear criminal act. President Lee Jae-myung again calls for tough action against the surge in hate speech across South Korea. Also today, his cabinet approves a new national target to cut greenhouse gas emissions. We have a wrap-up. And a look ahead to the economy for next year. South Korea's top think tanks release new forecasts for global and domestic growth. We break down what's behind these numbers. The shutdown, soon to be shut down? The U.S. Senate finally breaks the record-long stalemate, moving one step closer to reopening the government. Good evening, and thank you for joining us on this Tuesday evening. I'm Song Yu-jin, filling in for Kim Dami. Newscenter begins here at home tonight. At a cabinet meeting today, President Lee Jae-myung called for stern punishment for racial discrimination and hate speech, which he says have become rampant here in South Korea. The cabinet today also confirmed the country's new emissions target for 2035. Our senior presidential office correspondent Yoon Jung-min has our top story.
Racial discrimination and hate speech are a threat to democracy and need to be rooted out. That was President Lee Jae-myung as he opened the weekly cabinet meeting on Tuesday, saying such comments, hatred, and disinformation are rampant in the Korean society and increase social unrest.
이는 표현의 자유의 한계를 넘어서는 명백한 범죄 행위입니다. 혐오 표현에 대한 처벌 장치를 속히 마련하고
As the president was briefed by his justice minister on revising the criminal act, he urged that the criminal defamation clause that punishes factual statements be separated from the criminal law, saying any related case should be dealt with under the civil code.
혐오 표현 처벌을 위한 형법 개정을 해야 될 필요가 있어 보이는데 만약에 하게 되면 그 사실적시 명예훼손 제도 이번 기회에 동시에 폐지하시는 걸 검토하십시오.
Recently, the chief of the Korean Red Cross resigned over past racist comments about foreign ambassadors, which were recently revealed by a report. The cabinet also confirmed on Tuesday a new goal to reduce South Korea's greenhouse gas emissions by 53 to 61% from the 2018 levels by 2035, as Lee called the change inevitable to achieve sustainable growth. At the same time, he also noted controversy, stressing the importance of striking a balance.
전통적인 예를 들면 석탄 발전소 또는 화석 연료 사용하는 산업들 이게 이제 부담이 커지는 거고. 그렇습니다. 대신에 이제 재생 에너지 산업이나 이런 부분은 기회가 또 생기는 거고.
Given past experiences, the affected industries worry that they wouldn't get the government support that they need, despite an earlier government promise.
The new emission target is set to be announced later this month at the COP30 in Brazil. The same day, the cabinet suggested that a task force be established to investigate any involvement of certain public officials in the martial law attempt by former President Yoon Suk-yeol last December. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Now, shifting focus, South Korea's industry minister says the joint fact sheet detailing trade and security agreements with the United States is now in its final stages. Minister Kim Jong-kwan made the remarks during the National Assembly's Trade, Industry, Energy, SMEs, and Startups Committee meeting on Tuesday, noting that while he would not predict an exact release date, the document is, quote, nearing its completion. The fact sheet will include Seoul's $350 billion investment pledge to Washington, of which $200 billion will be in cash, capped at $20 billion per year. Trade Minister Yo Han-gu added that the investments will target strategic sectors such as shipbuilding and semiconductors. On the economic front, a state-run think tank here in South Korea has released its latest global economic outlook for next year. The forecast has inched up, but only slightly. Our economics correspondent Kim Do-yeon explains what's behind this cautious optimism.
The global economy is projected to grow by 3.0% in 2026, maintaining the same pace as 2025. This is according to the state-run Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, which on Tuesday released this forecast in its 2026 World Economic Outlook report. This represents a 0.1 percentage point upward revision from the Institute's previous forecast made in May. KIEP summarized the economic outlook for 2026 using the key phrase, buffer slowdown amid an asymmetric world.
The buffered slowdown component of the key phrase signifies that corporations and nations are partially defending against downside pressures by mitigating shocks through various responses. Meanwhile, the asymmetric world refers to the phenomenon where the global economy, lacking a clear common direction or momentum, exhibits divergent trends by country and sector.
One major downside risk to the global economy was the rapid changes in the new tariff and trade order as uncertainty continues to loom with the U.S. tariffs effects starting to kick in. The Institute noted that the U.S. administration's implementation of bilateral tariffs has weakened the multilateral trading system.
As countries with a high dependency on trade will find it difficult to avoid pressure from reduced exports due to worsening external conditions, this uncertainty in the trade sector is one of the most significant downside risks.
As of October 2025, the average U.S. effective tariff rate reached 17.9%. KIEP cited IMF projections that these high barriers will slow global trade volume growth to an average of 2.9% in 2025 to 2026, down from 3.5% in 2024. Other downsides noted were weakened fiscal capacity in major nations and disruptions from imbalanced investment in AI. Growth by region showed differences among some key players. The U.S. economy is forecast to grow by 1.6% as the negative effects of tariff policies begin to dampen consumer sentiment. The Eurozone is projected to grow by 1.1% and Japan by 0.6%. Among emerging markets, China is forecast to grow at 4.2%, slowed by the 2025 base effect and ongoing trade conflicts. India is expected to maintain strong 6.5% growth, while the ASEAN 5 nations are projected to grow at 4.7%. With global growth forecasts at a low 3.0%, KIEP says international cooperation is essential as the world faces a buffer slowdown in an asymmetric era where many countries have limited policy options to manage risks. 김도연, Arirang News.
Now our next story covers what lies ahead for South Korea's economy in 2026. The outlook at home looks much brighter than the global picture. Here's Moon Ji-young with more.
South Korea's state-run think tank, the Korea Development Institute, has forecast that the nation's economy will grow by 1.8% in 2026. According to its report on Tuesday, the Korean economy is currently showing a modest improvement driven by recovering consumption and strong exports. While construction investment remains weak, manufacturing and services are improving. Exports have been sustained by a boom in semiconductors. For 2026, the KDI projects this dynamic will shift. It forecasts that export growth by volume will slow significantly to 1.3%, down from 4.1% in 2025. This slowdown is attributed to the fading effects of front-loaded exports and the full impact of U.S. tariffs.
The growth of exports may gradually decelerate as the impact of tariff hikes progressively spreads. However, with consumption improving due to falling market interest rates and expansionary fiscal policies, accumulated construction orders are expected to partially translate into construction investment with a time lag. Consequently, despite the slowdown in export growth, the economy is anticipated to see a moderate improvement, primarily driven by domestic demand.
Domestic demand is expected to recover and support next year's growth. Private consumption is forecast to rise by 1.6%, up from this year's 1.3%, supported by falling market interest rates and expansionary fiscal policy. Construction investment is also expected to rebound to 2.2% growth after a severe 9.1% contraction this year. High trade-related uncertainty remains a primary risk factor for the outlook, with a persistently high exchange rate also posing potential upward pressure on inflation. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
Now, in the world of tech, the South Korean government has asked Google to supplement its request to export high-resolution map data with revised documentation. At a meeting on Tuesday, the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport said its review committee agreed to delay its decision and gave the tech giant until February 5th to submit the revised documents. Officials say Google accepted conditions such as blurring security facilities and blocking coordinate exposure, but has yet to formally include them. The government maintains that exporting detailed maps poses national security risks and has continued to urge Google to build a domestic data center. Now, the debate over raising the mandatory retirement age here in South Korea continues to resurface here in the country. The consensus is that the retirement age, which currently stands at 60, should be raised to help fill the income gap after retirement. However, clashes among various stakeholders have prevented concrete progress from being made, and the legislative process is expected to be an uphill battle. Now, to discuss the details for politics and diplomacy this week, we have our National Assembly correspondent An Seong-jin in the studio. Welcome, Seong-jin.
Thanks for having me, Eugene.
Thank you for being with us. So, Seong-jin, let's start with the most basic question. So, what's this issue surrounding the mandatory retirement age?
Right, great question, Eugene. So, Korea's current retirement age is at 60, but the National Assembly is discussing a bill to extend it to 65. Now, the problem, as you rightly mentioned, is that there is a consensus among the fact that there is some change necessary, but opinions are varied depending on the stakeholder. Labor groups are very much in favor, though the reasons may differ. Some worry over the income gap between the age of retirement and receiving a pension, whereas some express concern over poverty of the aging population. But all of them are equally urging the political parties to pass the legislation within the year. The Federation of Korean Trade Unions and the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions held a joint press conference at the parliament last week, demanding that the retirement age be raised to 65.
If we don't act now, the social costs will be irreversible. It's time for the ruling Democratic Party to present a concrete legislative plan.
Now, industry representatives, on the other hand, have concerns about labor market restructuring without sufficient countermeasures. They argue that growing pressure from an intensifying global technology competition and U.S. tariffs already affects businesses, and that it will only widen the gap between small and large enterprises. They've also added that this may potentially harm the job prospects of young people. According to Bank of Korea research, when the retirement age of 60 was first introduced, for every additional worker hired aged 55 to 59, the number of young workers aged 23 to 27 decreased by as many as of 1.5.
I see. So we always want to know the big question, which is why. So why is addressing this issue so important?
Right. This reason is important for South Korea because South Korea is transforming into an age society where people above the age of 60 to 65 are taking up over more than 20% of the total population. Now, the birth rate hovering in the 0.8 range is at a record low. Now, what all these numbers mean is that as the working age population rapidly declines, the age for receiving a national pension continues to rise. This means that with the current retirement age at 60, this may leave a potential income gap of up to 5 years, which is why, regardless of political party, there's a consensus that there is an issue that needs to be addressed.
Right. Tell us, Seong-jin, where do the main political parties stand on this issue?
Right. So I've just briefly kind of touched upon it, but the ruling Democratic Party has reaffirmed its push for the bill by the end of this year. But whether, as we've just talked about, the move will gain momentum is actually still in question.
It's a positive measure that can make good use of skilled workers. However, the potential impact on the employment of young people and the increased burden on businesses must be carefully considered.
The party's Special Committee on Retirement Age Extension plans to complete legislation that proposes gradually raising the retirement age from 60 to 65. Several timelines are under discussion, with a possible completion date around 2033 or 2041. The People Power Party also seems to support extending the retirement age, as its Policy Committee Chair Kim Do-up stated, though there are voices that again express concern over the employment of young people. Now, extending the retirement age is a complex issue that involves not only a generational divide, but also issues surrounding the burden being placed on corporations, rising unemployment of young people, and inevitable change in population structure. So we will have to keep an eye on till the end of the year to see whether the Parliament actually passes the bill.
All right, Songjin, thank you for your report and hope you keep us updated on this issue.
Thank you for having me, Yujin.
Thank you. Now, on the international front, 41 days into the longest shutdown in the United States that the country has ever seen, the Senate has approved a deal that could bring federal operations back online. Now, the ball is in the House's court. Our Moon Hae-ryun walks us through the developments and what's next.
The U.S. Senate has voted to end the longest government shutdown in American history, clearing a major hurdle toward reopening federal agencies after 41 days of paralysis. The 60-40 vote late Monday broke a weeks-long stalemate as federal food aid stalled, airport delays mounted, and hundreds of thousands of federal workers went without pay. The shutdown began on October 1st when the new fiscal year started without a budget in place, and lawmakers failed to agree on funding legislation amid deep political disputes. Nearly all Senate Republicans backed Monday's bill, joined by a small group of Democrats who had hoped to tie the government funding measure to healthcare subsidies that will expire at the end of the year. The agreement calls for a December vote on these subsidies aiding 24 million Americans, but provides no promise they will be extended. The shutdown is, however, not officially over yet. The measure now heads to the House of Representatives out of session since mid-September, before it is sent to President Donald Trump's desk to be signed for the U.S. federal government to officially reopen. Speaker Mike Johnson says he hopes to bring it to vote as early as Wednesday and urged lawmakers to return to Washington right now to avoid further delays. President Donald Trump has already signaled that he will support the bill, telling reporters in the Oval Office that the deal is strong and that the government will reopen quickly. The agreement would reverse the mass firings ordered during the shutdown and guarantee back pay for impacted federal workers.
Well, I will be. I'll abide by the deal.
Trump also claimed that air travel would become better than normal once operations resume, citing improvements his administration says are being made to air traffic control systems. He added that the U.S. is in the final bids for what he described as the world's finest modernization effort, though those details were not immediately confirmed by independent agencies. If the House approves the package, the shutdown could officially end within days, allowing federal workers to return to their jobs and restoring essential government services after more than a month of nationwide strain. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
In other news, Korea and France will celebrate their 140th anniversary of diplomatic relations next year and aim to arrange reciprocal visits of Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Emmanuel Macron to mark the occasion. That's according to the French embassy in Seoul, which held a press conference unveiling the official poster and slogan of the diplomatic milestone: creativity, opportunities, and solidarity. Ambassador Philippe Berthoud said the two countries are working to further advance their cooperation in a growing range of strategic areas, including AI, nuclear energy, basic science, and next-generation technologies. Now, when asked, Berthoud added that there are ongoing efforts to organize reciprocal visits at the top level. Now, numerous cultural events will also take place throughout the year in multiple Korean cities. The launch event will open in Bucheon and the closing ceremony in Busan. And Japan's top diplomat to South Korea has stressed that interpersonal exchanges are crucial to building deeper trust between the two nations for the stable development of bilateral ties. The remarks made by Japanese Ambassador Koichi Mizushima came on Tuesday at a tourism promotion reception in Seoul, where around 80 participants from government agencies, travel companies, and airlines gathered. Now, promoting people-to-people exchanges between Korea and Japan upon the 60th anniversary of normalizing diplomatic ties, the event aimed to boost tourism to Japan's smaller regional cities. This comes after the first leaders' meeting between President Lee Jae-myung and Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi last month, where they agreed to work on expanding civilian exchanges. Around a dozen prefectures, including Nagano, Iwate, Miyagi, and Fukuoka, took part in the event, represented by their mayors and governors, and setting up booths to introduce local attractions. Now, moving on to the security front, South Korea's Navy had launched a new task fleet command earlier this year for flexible operations going beyond specific maritime regions. Now, it conducted its first major drill recently to boost its combat capability. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung was at the site.
Warships going at a speed of 10 knots target an enemy warship located around 8 kilometers away. Water columns splash on the surface of the sea as the ships fire their guns at the same time. This is part of the Navy Task Fleet Command's 3-day drills to enhance operational capabilities.
Marking the very first fleet-level maritime maneuver training, the Navy's Task Fleet Command conducted a variety of drills moving across the East and the South Sea.
Navy's 1st, 2nd, and 3rd fleets operate in the East, West, and South Seas respectively, whereas the Task Fleet Command, established this February, aims to undertake operations across all maritime regions and even beyond the South Korea's maritime boundaries. The command had only conducted test group and squadron-level exercises until now. 7 warships, including the Aegis destroyer ROK's Cheongjo the Great, and 3 aircraft took part in the first fleet-level exercise, some 70 kilometers east of Pohang. Under simulated scenarios, ROK's Seoul Ryuseongyong detected multiple aircraft operations and missile attacks. After tracking the threats, the vessel ordered other warships to engage in combat and successfully took down the targets with SM-2 missiles.
Through its first fleet-level maneuver exercise, the Task Fleet Command was able to establish an operational posture capable of executing assigned missions anytime, anywhere. It will continue to maintain military readiness with overwhelming combat power, ensuring victory in any contingency.
The command will hold such exercises regularly to strengthen its capability to deal with whatever threats it might encounter. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News, Pohang.
Now, staying on the domestic front, 2 more boiler towers were demolished at a thermal power plant in South Korea's southeastern city of Ulsan at noon on Tuesday. After the demolition, search operations resumed for 4 workers trapped under a tower that collapsed last Thursday. Now, among the trapped workers, 2 have been located who are presumed dead, while another 2 remain missing. Firefighting authorities said that around 70 personnel will be sent inside the rubble to search for the missing. Cranes, other heavy equipment, and rescue dogs will also aid in the effort.
Finely colored autumn leaves are at their peak. It started colder than yesterday with a temperature of 3.9 degrees Celsius in the morning in Seoul today. However, the temperatures rose quickly in the autumn sun, and the cold eased off in the daytime. Tomorrow and Thursday, the day of the National College Entrance Exam, will have similar weather than usual. The daytime temperature in Seoul will rise to 16 degrees, so there will be no cold spells for the time being. As there is a huge temperature gap between morning and day, please dress warmly. Tomorrow morning, Seoul will start off at 6 degrees, Gwangju at 5 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 15 degrees in Chuncheon, 18 degrees in Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju. Temperatures will be similar to or a bit higher than the average temperature for this time of year throughout the week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that's Newscenter for tonight. For all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.